In the heart of the Emberwood, where the trees whispered songs no one could hear anymore, a girl named Kaela walked alone. She wasn't like the other children in the village of Solnest. While they ran and laughed and shouted with the wind, Kaela preferred the hush of the woods, the way the moss muted her footsteps and the way her thoughts seemed to echo in the silence. Kaela had always struggled with words. When she tried to speak, her tongue tangled like vines. She had learned to stay quiet, to listen instead. But her heart was a song waiting to be sung. That afternoon, as golden twilight spilled through the branches, Kaela wandered farther than she ever had. The air shimmered strangely. Birds, usually silent these days, chirped once and then fell quiet again, like a breath caught in the throat. Something pulled her forward. Then she saw it. At the base of an ancient tree, its roots tangled like the fingers of a sleeping giant, a single feather pulsed with light. Not ordinary light, but something alive. Fire, gold, red, and music all at once. Kaela dropped to her knees. The feather was warm to the touch. As soon as her fingers wrapped around it, the wind shifted. A note, clear, long forgotten, sang through the trees. It brushed her cheek and danced past her ears like someone had whispered just for her. She gasped. Not out of fear, out of recognition. The song wasn't just beautiful. It was calling her. And in that moment, Kaela knew, the world had been waiting for someone to listen. To follow, to find what had been lost. And somehow, that someone was her. Kaela walked back to Solnest with the glowing feather wrapped carefully in her shawl. Though it no longer shone as brightly, a faint warmth pulsed from it, like the beat of a tiny, living heart. As she reached the edge of the village, the colors around her seemed duller than she remembered. Solnest had always been quiet, but now the silence felt heavier, like a blanket too thick to lift. No one sang anymore, not since the Firebird vanished. Long ago, the people said the Firebird flew through the skies of Solnest every spring, scattering sparks of song that healed sorrow and soothed aching hearts. Its music bloomed flowers before the snow melted. But one day, it disappeared, and the songs with it. Slowly, smiles faded, fields stopped blooming, and worst of all, no child born after the Firebird's last visit had ever sung a note. Kaela had only known this silent version of her home. But now, with the feather in her cloak, her ears noticed everything differently. The hush of the wind. The strain in her neighbor's shoulders. The way mothers hummed silent lullabies to sleeping babies, too afraid to try sound and be disappointed. "Kaela," whispered an old baker as she passed. "You all right, child?" Kaela nodded. Her voice stayed hidden, as always. She walked past the empty fountain in the village square. It once sang music when the Firebird returned, her mother once told her. Now moss climbed over its edges like it wanted to bury the memory. That night, in her tiny cottage on the hill, Kaela sat at her window, the feather resting on the sill beside her. It pulsed again, once, and then the faintest sound shimmered through the room. A single note, so soft, Kaela thought she had imagined it. She turned to the feather. It glowed gently, and then a whisper, like wind through a flute, drifted into her thoughts. "Find the harp whose strings remember." Kaela's eyes widened. The feather had spoken, not in words, but in feeling. In sound. And Kaela understood. She didn't sleep that night. She packed before dawn. Kaela left Solnest as the morning mist still clung to the ground. No one saw her go. The path through the Emberwood curled like a question, uncertain and tangled with roots, but Kaela followed the feather's quiet warmth in her palm. The voice of the feather, though faint, had been clear in her heart. Find the harp whose strings remember. By midday, she found herself at the edge of a steep ravine, where a narrow path of stone led down into shadow. She hesitated. The deeper she went, the more the forest seemed to hold its breath. The walls of the ravine glistened with crystals, tiny shards of light reflecting her reflection back at her 1,000 times. And beneath it all, she heard it, a hum. Low and trembling, like the earth itself was sighing a song too long held back. At the bottom of the ravine was a cave. Its mouth glowed faintly, not from flame, but from threads of light strung across its entrance, like the strands of a giant harp. Kaela reached out. The strings thrummed as her fingers brushed them. The sound didn't echo. It vibrated through her bones. She stepped inside. The cave opened into a dome of stone and quartz, glittering like frozen stardust. In the center stood a harp taller than she was, its frame carved from silver roots and moonstone wood, its strings made of pure firelight. It was waiting. Kaela approached. Her hand trembled as she reached out. Thrum. The sound that emerged wasn't just a note. It was a memory. Her mother's laugh on a sunny day. Her father singing quietly to the wind before he disappeared into the mountains. A younger Kaela twirling alone in the fields, wishing someone would hear her without her needing to speak. The harp was not just music. It was memory, emotion, truth. "You have found me," said a voice, not spoken, but sung. A shape emerged from the light, a woman woven of smoke and stars, her eyes closed, her hands resting on the harp. "I am the spirit of the whispering harp," she said softly. "And you, Kaela, carry the fire the world has forgotten." Kaela blinked. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Only a soft, cracked sound, like the start of a note. "You do not need to speak," the spirit said kindly. "Your song lives beyond words." Kaela held out the firebird's feather. It pulsed again, brighter than ever. The spirit touched it gently, and a thread of flame unraveled from its tip. She tied it to the harp's center string. "Take this," she whispered. The firebird's song was broken when her final note was never heard. "You must gather what was lost, and sing it anew. Seek the mountain of echoes, the next note waits for you there." Kaela bowed, tears in her eyes. She did not understand everything. But she felt it. She wasn't just following the firebird's song anymore. She was becoming part of it. The path to the mountain of echoes began where the Emberwood ended. Kaela walked for 2 days, guided by the fire thread now wrapped around her wrist like a bracelet of living music. It shimmered when she neared the right trail, dimmed when she wandered. The wind had begun to hum, faint and strange, as if the world itself was tuning an invisible harp. When she first saw the mountain, it wasn't what she expected. It did not pierce the sky like a jagged crown. It stood alone, soft and sloping, cloaked in mist, with smooth ridges that looked carved by centuries of sound. At its peak, the clouds curled in spirals, not from storm, but from memory. Kaela climbed in silence. With every step, she heard more than just the rustle of leaves or crunch of stone. She heard voices, songs, laughter, faint, echoed, like sounds forgotten by the world, still clinging to the mountain's sides. A lullaby whispered through a breeze. A girl's voice shouting across a meadow. A flute sweep from another lifetime. Each sound brushed Kaela's heart like a forgotten touch. By the time she reached the first ledge, she was weeping. Not from sadness, from recognition. These were echoes of the firebird's song. And something deeper. The mountain remembered what the world had forgotten. At a bend in the trail, she found a broken pillar. Etched into the stone was a circle of musical notes glowing faintly. She knelt beside it, brushing moss away, and felt the thread on her wrist grow hot. "Sing," the wind seemed to say. I can't," she whispered. "Not yet." She looked out across the valley below, and there, just for a moment, she saw a shimmer of fire in the clouds. A shadow. Wings. The firebird. She stood slowly. If the firebird was near, she needed to keep going. Higher and higher, Kaela climbed. The mountain answered her with waves of long-lost sound. A song played when she was born. A melody her mother hummed with no words. A hum that once healed wounds, and turned sorrow into flame. And at the summit, where the world fell away and the sky stretched vast and unbroken, Kaela found a small altar. Upon it sat a stone flute, old and cracked, its surface lined with fire veins. She touched it, and the wind sang. A second note had returned. Not from her lips. From her presence. From her listening. Kaela placed the flute in her satchel. The flame thread wrapped gently around it, like a promise. She looked to the clouds once more. The firebird was not gone. Just waiting for its song to be made whole. The summit winds faded behind her as Kaela descended the other side of the mountain of echoes, guided now by both the fire thread and the old flute humming softly from her satchel. Her steps were careful. The ground here was scorched in places, as though great heat had once seared it, but long ago. The sky had shifted. What was once glowing twilight had now dimmed to a dusky veil, and the trees below were twisted and still. Not with malice, but with mourning. She entered what had once been a sanctuary. A circular ruin lay before her, stone columns half fallen, archways crumbled to dust. Wild vines had begun to grow across the broken floor, but Kaela saw the shape clearly. A great cage. Its bars, silver-black and splintered, arched up toward the sky in shattered lines. Some were melted, others torn. Inside, nothing stirred but wind. Kaela stepped inside. Silence fell like a curtain. She felt it in her chest. Not peace, not calm. A trapped silence. The kind left behind when someone is ripped from the world mid-song. On the ground lay fragments, feathers, once aflame, now smoldered dark and fragile. She bent and touched one. It turned to ash. Kaela closed her eyes. The Firebird had been caged here. Not just hidden, imprisoned. But why? By whom? The silence offered no answers, only grief. Kaela stood in the center of the broken cage, her heart echoing with unspoken questions. Then she felt the warmth of the feather in her pouch stir again. She held it out. The fire thread curled upward, pointing toward a faint carving on the inner wall. A circle, a symbol, a flame with wings, and beneath it, words, faint and broken. When the voice was taken, silence was chained. Kaela traced the phrase with her fingers. The Firebird hadn't just fled. It had been silenced. She stood still for a long time. Then she did the bravest thing she could. She hummed, just a note, wobbly, quiet, but in the stillness, it filled the cage. And something shifted. The feather flared. The ash stirred, and Kaela felt it, a sound awakening deep beneath the ruins. The silence had cracked, not enough to free the Firebird, but enough to know it still listened. From the broken sanctuary of the cage, the fire thread wrapped around Kaela's wrist began to glow with a cooler light, no longer blazing, but soft and silver blue, like starlight on water. She followed its pull through tangled woods and whispering winds, until she came to the edge of a steep ravine. Below lay something impossible, a river made of light. It shimmered like liquid memory, soft, glowing, and slow-moving. Instead of reflecting the sky, the river revealed scenes inside its waters, flickering visions, dreams, moments, memories. Kaela stepped onto a boat made of curved leaves and fire-touched wood waiting at the riverbank, as if it had always been there for her. The moment she sat down, the current moved. It carried her gently. No paddles needed, no words spoken. The silence of the river was not heavy like before. It was sacred, listening. As the boat glided forward, the river began to show her things. She saw the Firebird as it once had been, soaring across golden skies, singing trails of flame that turned into blossoms. Villagers danced. Children sang without fear. Her village, her own village, was once filled with color and laughter. Then, the river showed something else. A shadow, a hooded figure, with eyes like frost, rising from the northern peaks. Where the Firebird flew, it followed. Where songs were sung, it drained them. And then, the cage. She saw it form from silver threads of cold magic, closing around the Firebird mid-flight. The Firebird screamed, not in fear, but in song, a note so powerful it broke mountains and melted stars. But no one heard it. Because the world had already forgotten how to listen. Kaela gripped the sides of the boat. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Then the vision shifted. She saw herself, a younger Kaela, curled up beside her mother, silent, watching the stars. Her mother singing to her. Kaela trying to sing back, but no sound would come. She saw the pain in her eyes. But then, the image changed. She saw herself as she was now. Braver, listening, singing one cracked note inside a broken cage. She had changed. The river slowed. At the end of its course was a glowing shore, where the water fell into a silent pool that pulsed like a great heart. Kaela stepped out. The fire thread around her wrist glowed bright once more. And from the center of the pool, rising from the memories, came a melody. Not sung aloud, but understood. Another piece of the Firebird's song had returned. And Kaela had earned it not by singing, but by remembering. Kaela walked beyond the river of remembering, her steps light but her heart heavy with all she had seen. The memories from the river clung to her, not as burdens, but as truths. The fire thread tugged her eastward, deeper into a canyon where the earth pulsed with soft warmth. Strange stones lined the path, shaped like petals, their edges glowing with faint red light. At the canyon's end, she came to a chamber, silent, round, and carved into the rock like it had been born there rather than built. At its center stood a mirror. It wasn't glass. It was flame. The mirror of flame stood taller than Kaela, framed by stone roots and woven metal. Its surface danced not with reflections of the world around her, but with swirling fire, constant, alive, and watching. Kaela stepped forward. She expected to see nothing. But then, the flames shifted. And there she was, herself. But not as she was now. In the fire, she saw a version of herself cloaked in radiant light. Her eyes were steady, her posture strong, her mouth was open, singing. The fire Kaela's voice sent ripples through the flames, and the canyon walls quivered with its power. Her hair lifted in the heat like a crown, and wings, faint, smoky, shimmered behind her. Kaela's breath caught. Was this a vision of who she could become? Or who she already was, hidden beneath fear? The real Kaela stepped closer. The mirror's flame licked the edges of her shawl but did not burn. You are not weak because you are quiet, the fire Kaela whispered, her voice inside Kaela's mind. You are strong because you listen. You see what others do not. But now, you must not only listen. You must believe in the voice you hold. Kaela trembled. Her voice had always failed her. But this time, she placed her hand on the fire. It didn't scorch her. It pulsed warmly. From her satchel, the old flute began to glow. From her wrist, the fire thread reached toward the mirror. Kaela took a breath. Then, she spoke. Just one word. Sing. And the mirror obeyed. The flames danced upward, releasing a burst of sound, not from Kaela, but from the memory of her voice. The fire Kaela smiled, and the chamber lit up like a sunrise. The mirror stilled. Kaela stood alone once more. But she was different now. She had seen the strength inside her, not just in fire, but in song. And she knew what she had to do. It was time to find the Firebird. Not just to listen, but to sing the song that would set it free. The chamber of the mirror of flame faded behind Kaela like a dream half remembered. But the fire still burned within her. Her path now led into the hollow glade, a sacred clearing said to lie between the waking world and the realm of echoes. Legends whispered that only those who carried forgotten songs could pass through it. Kaela walked without fear. The trees here bowed toward her, branches heavy with glowing blossoms that pulsed in rhythm with her breath. The wind had stilled. The birds did not chirp, nor did leaves rustle. The air shimmered with anticipation. In the center of the glade stood a circle of stones, ancient, cracked, and humming. Kaela stepped into the circle. A great hush fell over everything. One by one, small spirits of flame rose from the stones, flickering creatures with wings of ember and eyes like stars. They hovered silently around her, waiting for the song. Kaela's hands trembled. Her throat felt tight. She had never sung in front of anyone. Never even sung in front of herself. But she remembered the fire Kaela in the mirror. The girl who had already found her voice. And she remembered the Firebird, caged and silenced. If she did not sing, who would? She placed a hand over her heart. It beat fast, but steady. She took a breath, and she began to sing. At first, it was quiet. A thin note, unsteady, like light across rippling water. But she didn't stop. The song wove from her chest like a ribbon of flame, drawn from all the moments she had carried. Her mother's hums, the harp's whisper, the mountain's echo, the river's memories, the mirror's truth. Her voice cracked, and then soared. And the spirits listened. They did not join. They did not move. They glowed. The flame thread around her wrist flared with golden light. The old flute in her satchel rang like a bell. And above her, the sky opened. A burst of light fell from the heavens like a comet. Wings of fire spread wide. Eyes glowing like twin dawns. The Firebird descended. It circled once, trailing embers, before landing in the center of the glade, majestic, beautiful, and trembling. Kaela's voice faltered. The Firebird raised its head and sang with her. Their voices twined, two halves of a song lost across time. The stones cracked, releasing ancient chords. The fire spirits spun in circles of joy. And Kaela felt it. The song was returning. But it wasn't finished. Not yet. The final note was not just sound. It was freedom. And Kaela knew now. That note must be sung not here, in this sacred glade, but back in the village that had forgotten how to sing. Kaela stood in the center of the hollow glade, breathless, her voice still trembling on the wind. The Firebird stood before her, tall and radiant, a creature of flame and starlight, its feathers glowing like molten gold and its eyes brimming with ancient sorrow. It had not spoken, yet Kaela understood. Its voice was returning, piece by piece, memory by memory, note by note. But one note still remained. The last one. The note that could awaken not just the Firebird, but the world. The flame thread around Kaela's wrist tightened gently, then loosened, as if offering a quiet goodbye. The Firebird lowered its head, and Kaela stepped forward. She reached out, and for the first time, the Firebird bowed. Its wings spread wide, and without a word, Kaela climbed onto its back. The wind answered with a soft roar. In a burst of fire and air, the Firebird lifted them skyward, spiraling through twilight clouds, past silver peaks and golden trees, soaring faster than any wind Kaela had ever known. They flew over the river of remembering, over the mountain of echoes, over the broken cage, now blooming with glowing flowers where silence once ruled. And at last, over Solnest. Kaela gasped. The village looked smaller than she remembered, hunched and gray, roofs dark with ash, windows shuttered not from storm, but from hopelessness. No sound rose from it. Not even wind. The Firebird circled once, then descended. Kaela landed in the town square, her feet touching the cobblestone with certainty. The people peeked from doors and windows, eyes wide with disbelief. They had seen fire, wings, light. They had seen the Firebird. And then they saw her. Kaela, the girl who never spoke. Now stepping into the center of the square with light around her, with her hands glowing faintly, and the Firebird behind her like a flame rising from the earth. She took a deep breath. And she sang. Her voice filled the village. Not like thunder, like truth. Soft, sure, strong. The lullaby her mother once sang. The hum of the harp. The river's memory. The echo from the mountain. The broken silence of the cage. All woven into one final note, whole and clear. And from behind her, the Firebird joined in. Its song poured through the streets, through shuttered windows, through hearts that had long forgotten what hope sounded like. Children clutched their chests, feeling something they had never felt before. The baker knelt, weeping openly. The trees shuddered, then bloomed. The fountain in the square, long silent, began to play music once more. Not water, not metal, song. Light exploded into the sky like a sun reborn. The Firebird lifted its wings and soared upward, spiraling into a sky no longer empty, no longer silent. And Kaela stood there, not as the quiet girl, but as the one who remembered. The one who sang. The one who listened, and answered. The days that followed the Firebird's return passed like a dream unfurling its wings. Solnest, once gray and hollow, bloomed with color again. The trees sang in the breeze, flowers opened with the sunrise, and laughter, real, ringing laughter, filled the village streets. People no longer whispered in sorrow. They spoke boldly, sung freely, and even danced in the square beneath the newly rebuilt fountain that once again sang its song of flowing hope. But none of it would have happened without the girl who once could not speak. Kaela walked through her village now with light in her eyes and warmth in her chest. People greeted her with smiles, not because she had changed into someone louder or grander, but because she had shown them the power that had always lived in the quiet places. She no longer feared her voice. Not because it was perfect, but because it was hers. The Firebird returned often, circling the skies above Solnest, leaving trails of golden flame that rained down as flower petals. When it sang, Kaela sang with it. Together, they kept the harmony alive, not as performers, but as keepers of remembrance, of courage, and of truth. One evening, as the stars blinked awake, Kaela stood in the center of the village with children gathered around her. She played the old flute from the mountain, its cracks now lined with light, and sang a new song, one she had written herself. It was about a world that had gone quiet. And a girl who found its song again. When she finished, there was silence for just a breath, and then, the children sang the chorus back to her. Not just one. Not just a few. All of them. Their voices rose like dawn, soft and bright. And Kaela knew, the Firebird's song would never be lost again. Because now, it lived in many voices. Even the smallest ones. Especially the smallest ones. As the stars blinked above her, Kaela looked up and smiled. The Firebird soared across the moonlit sky, its flame trailing a ribbon of music that wrapped around the village like a promise. Not the end of the story. Just the beginning. Rainbow moral lesson. True courage is not in the loudest shout or the strongest sword, but in the quiet, steady voice that dares to rise when the world has forgotten how to listen. Even the smallest voice can carry the biggest light, when it speaks from the heart. For more motivation stories, please like, share, and subscribe this channel. Thanks and God bless.